vein. And now you will see that I move the transducer to another place. The vein is healthy. And then you have the autograd flow and no reflux. So this is what we test when we do the maneuvers. Coming back to the exploration of the groin, where it will be my next step. First, I want to make a question again to the audience. Is the treatment you decide depending on the findings at the terminal and pre-terminal valves? Or do you treat depending on the presence of reflux but independence where the flow source is? Or do you treat based on the clinical findings? I know it's not so easy to answer the question, but you only can choose one. Of course, provided always that the patient has an illness. I mean, you treat the clinical findings. I mean, you don't do duplex, is this question. Obviously, you treat always according to the clinical findings. But when you have decided to treat this patient, the way to treat him is depending on one of these questions. So again, I go on. Oh, it's already ready. So I thought this would be like this: 36% majority treat independently of the source. This is okay, but nevertheless, I would very much encourage in the future to just write down what the source were to analyze the recurrences, but we will see that later on. So now we have our image of the competent valves in the groin, the flow in a healthy person. And the tributaries have their flow also. And when there is a reflux in the great saphenous vein, we have to know from where it comes. Mostly, it will come from the deep vein through the terminal and pre-terminal valve, and this is called axial reflux. And this means that the terminal and the pre-terminal valve are incompetent. This is shown in the longitudinal. We have a longitudinal cut through the groin. This is systole, the flow is upwards, and then in the diastole, it comes from the deep vein through the both valves into the great saphenous vein. Again, an image you measure in this point, you measure at the very level of the terminal valve, and so you can document in color and in PV that there is a reflux. This is the systole again, and this is the diastole. And this is the place where the deep vein ends and the great saphenous vein enters into the deep vein. And there is where you have to measure to sort out if the terminal valve is competent or not. So the other option is that the terminal valve is competent and the reflux comes from the tributary with competent terminal valve. This is called paraosteal reflux because the ostium, this is the ostium level. The surgeons know that. And the reflux isn't coming through the ostium, but it's coming from another place, paraosteal. It's not an axial reflux. And this you see again a longitudinal view. This is the systole with an autograde flow, and this is the diastole, where the reflux does not come from the deep vein, but from the tributary. And if you once have seen it, like here in this presentation, you will always rediscover it in your patients. Another example, systole with inflow, diastole, there is no reflux from the deep vein, but only from the tributary. And in the cross section again, you see that. At this level, there is the terminal valve and there is no flow. The difference between a competent and incompetent terminal valve, this is an incompetent valve, you have the reflux from the deep vein. This is a competent terminal valve, you have the reflux from another way, not the deep vein. What happens in Valsalva if you have a competent terminal valve? You will see when you press that the ostium level is broadening, but there is no reflux during the Valsalva. And when you then release the Valsalva, the person can breathe again, you will have the inflow and the flow towards the deep vein, but no reflux. This is again a little movie. I hope, sorry, I have to put this is a movie about this exploration at the terminal and pre-terminal valve. You see when the terminal valve is incompetent, it can escape through the accessory or into the great saphenous vein. and the exploration of the terminal valve is either in cross section, in color, but